Hello BookTube, it's Roz, and look who's here.
Oh,
It's Tilly.
We're in our bubble.
We're in a bubble.
A little bubble.
Our rates of infection and reproduction are sufficiently low in both the areas where we live to risk forming a bubble and being able to actually touch each other.
With washed hands.
Oh, very well, absolutely. Yeah. So, and that means we're going to make some Jane Austen July content together. And
yes.
And as it is, like, it is the BookTube high point of the year.
Yeah.
For me, at least. Is it for you?
It's the key event.
Yeah.
Between Jane Austen July and Booktober, I think.
It is one of the things that got me into BookTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, you involving me in last year's Jane Austen July.
Yeah.
So, and we've both been reading lots of lovely things. And this video together, the thing that we've read in common this Jane Austen July, well, there's going to be two things, but one of them is Miss Austen by Gill Hornby.
As you can potentially see a little bit of.
On the Kindle. A lot of Kindle reading going on this year because of COVID-19.
Yeah, not going to libraries and bookshops.
Absolutely.
And so on.
So, what did you think?
I was going to ask you what you thought to get started.
Well, the thing that I have to admit to up front, again, I guess, is that I'm never very well disposed towards Jane Austen retellings, fan fiction, all of that. Yeah. They rarely really hit the spotlight. Last year, everyone raved about Longbourn.
Yeah.
And
I was a bit disappointed by Longbourn.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a bad book, but it was just like, but it's not Jane Austen.
I think, that's
and I was really hopeful that Miss Austen wouldn't have that feeling for me because it's not a retelling of one of her books.
Yeah. And did you find that helped? Yeah. Yes,
it did help, but then I kind of was perhaps slightly disappointed in it for other reasons. Yeah. I feel like I'm a bit of a grouchy old woman about,
Are you a mean old broad?
Nothing mean old broad as Claudia and Marissa's, yes, mean girls and mean old broads. Yes, no, I think I come over all, it's nothing compares to you, Jane.
Well, this is true, and I always kind of get my hopes up, particularly when I heard people say that the writing in this was quite good, and obviously when you hear about something related to Austen and the writing's quite good, like, I immediately look for Jane Austen, and it is not, and no one is, and no one possibly could be. But we were talking earlier on today about how, so the story of this is Cassandra Austin, that's Jane's older sister, after Jane's death, is trying to curate the family story, I suppose. Yeah. And one aspect of this is she is looking at certain letters. Yeah. I didn't mind, after the first chapter or so, I didn't mind that the rest of the writing style didn't sound at all like Jane Austen. I did mind when the letters that Cassandra was reading that were ostensibly written by Jane Austen didn't really have anything of Jane's style. Yeah. And we have a lot of Jane's letters. I'm sure Gill Hornby has read many of these or all of these, but I felt like she could have done a little bit better at imitating this style. I've only read really extracts and I haven't read all of this by any means, which I find this quite amusing. Only this much is actually letters. All of that is notes. That's brilliant. But yeah, I felt
it's
like
scholarly. That's what it is.
It's very thorough.
But
I felt like she could have done a little bit of a better job of mimicking Jane for the few letters that she...
Yes, and actually one of my hopes in reading Miss Austen was that because it was not a retelling of one of the books, that I wouldn't be comparing the writing with Jane, so that I would be able to just relax and enjoy the book as a novel. And to an extent that was true of the main story and like... so the letters were almost like the jarring note, because then you did have to compare it, it inevitably didn't match up.
It just didn't feel like her tone at all.
I liked the pretext of, Cassandra wanting to try and kind of control Jane's story for posterity, and that she has faith that Jane will be someone that people will care about in the future, unlike probably most people around her would have assumed at the time. Famously, her grave doesn't even mention that she wrote novels.
And one of the characters that she draws on is Jane's sister-in-law and her sister-in-law Mary, who is convinced that James Austen is the writer that will be remembered. And you also get little hints about other people that want to get hold of the letters and might want to tell the family story, and that does happen. So that was clever. So she kind of connects little bits of what we actually know to then come up with her kind of hypothetical drama. The other thing that I quite liked is we always tell the story of Cassandra. We know that Cassandra Austin did burn some of Jane's letters, or did remove some extracts of other letters. And Deirdre, Faye, who's edited this version, has very carefully gone through, and she can identify exactly where there are missing letters because we know the regularity with which they wrote to one another. So if there's not one every 4 days, then there's a letter missing there.
And then you can speculate what was in
that letter. Can't remember what I was going to say. Yeah. So we have this story that Cassandra burnt these letters because she wanted to protect Jane's legacy and the memories that we have and the story that we have about Jane.
Yes.
But Gill Hornby kind of works in the idea that Cassandra is also protecting herself, and there are elements of her own story that she doesn't want people to know about. So she kind of burns those letters as well because they're too personal to her.
Which would be fair enough. Yeah. And so that side of the story kind of worked for me. That was okay. And the other thing that I found worked, which I thought might not have done, is the portrayal, a lot of the portrayal of Jane.
Yeah.
Because she's portrayed definitely as someone who suffers from depression and a sort of
almost like a kind of bipolar kind of where she has waves of periods where she's very productive and very excitable and enthusiastic, and then long periods where she isn't creative and isn't able to and that I thought that was a kind of reasonable and I felt like it was fairly convincing. It did seem to fit with I suppose certain periods that we know about of Jane's life. Maybe.
Yes. So like that was okay. What I was less comfortable with, I suppose, is she gives a version of Jane where Jane very consciously rejects romantic relationships.
Yeah.
And we kind of know that Jane does that, but it seemed unlikely that she would have been as conscious and deliberate about it.
Yeah, it did make it kind of quite deliberate and calculating, whereas I think we do have enough evidence in letters and in what people have said of her to know that she did actually quite like people's society and she quite liked like flirting and dancing with people and things like that. Whereas she kind of turns down its head slightly.
She does bring out the family reading aloud thing, and how Jane's books, really wrote books for to be read aloud and so on, and which I think is really, really true. And I'm at the moment I'm reading Juvenilia.
Yeah.
I've just read I read The History of England, and I'm reading Love and Friendship at the moment, and the pleasure of reading the Juvenilia is imagining the family circle and Jane,
all the family jokes
and reading aloud, and and who'd be sitting around
and the little references to things that they share.
And I felt like Gill Hornby did capture some of that in the sort of flashback the earlier period.
And I guess some of the difficulty of family as well she captured, because there's a lot of like family loyalty, and Cassandra frequently kind of talks about how she pities people who aren't Austens, but then she also talks about how like the kind of like the moments when they don't maybe get along so well with their brothers, or when they're depending on their brothers for things and their brothers don't come forward with it, and just the complexities of having such a large family.
And you could also tell that Gill Hornby has read all the novels, and there's little kind of almost not like literal scenes, but almost like emotional atmospheres in Miss Austen that kind of come from the books, I think.
There was one thing I meant to check actually before we started filming, but there's one quote that she uses where she talks about how I think she has Jane say, "Oh, I'm about as much use as a screen in front of the fire," and that is actually a quote from a contemporary anecdotal review of one of Jane's books. Oh. It's not something that Jane says. Yeah. It's something that somebody at the time wrote about maybe Mansfield Park or something. Right. She said like, "Oh, Fanny Price is about as much use as a fire screen" or something. Yeah. So I found it quite interesting that it kind of, unless it's purely coincidental, it shows that she had not just read the books and maybe the letters, but also these kind of little contemporary pieces of work written around Jane Austen. I don't know what her background is, whether she is a kind of Austen scholar or more of a writer.
No, I don't know. I presume she's related to Nick Hornby, the writer.
He does say in the back, it says many thanks to Nick Hornby for his input or something like that. So
yeah, but I didn't actually. I should have kind of looked her up, but I didn't. So it hit the spot okay, but it had sort of like nice bits of period detail, and I guess there's something about the importance of home and then displacement. Yeah. Which, you know, because obviously the rectory that she goes to visit, the family are having to move out, and that was something that obviously had happened to Jane and Cassandra, and the
book that they choose to read in the book is Persuasion, which again fits with the theme of kind of displacement and loss and passing time and
so on. So it was a sophisticated attempt, Miss Austen, that she pretty much
carried
off. But the trouble is, it's almost like it'd be better if I read it at a different time of year.
Yeah, when you hadn't just read all of the Austens to compare.
Exactly. It's unfair, actually.
Yeah. I did just want to talk a little bit about the present day plot, because it's got kind of like a past plot where it talks about Jane's life, and a present day plot where she's going to this rectory where people are having to move out. Yes. And essentially there's a bit of a mystery, and there's something going on there that Cassandra's not aware about, and she goes in and she starts to interfere. Yes. And I didn't like that, because things were fairly obvious to me as a reader, and I think probably to you too.
Utterly, yes.
And I found it hard to believe that Cassandra, like, she hears these hints of mystery and she doesn't even try and explore them. She just carries on, like, very single-mindedly pursuing the thing that she thinks is the right thing to do, without even trying to explore what's going on, and that didn't really work for me.
Like Emma, you mean?
Yeah.
I think
it's more obvious.
I agree, and I think it's like she was sort of trying to channel that sort of, you know, that you do get in some of the books where people misunderstand, and you know, but actually
it wasn't very well carried off.
It wasn't carried off because it was sort of too obvious what was going on,
and the romantic element of it wasn't believable at all, because she never really gave us a chance to see it.
No.
No, it was a bit off. I think.
Yeah. So, but like a worthwhile read. Yeah. Not a waste of time.
I think I enjoyed it more than Longbourn. Yeah. I'm trying to think which other.
Do you know what I've been, because I read Jane Austen at home as my non-fiction, and for Jane Austen July, and that reminded me that one of the things that sort of people say in talking about Longbourn is, because it brings the servants to the fore, and, you know, Jane Austen obviously sort of was unaware of the lives of servants and so on. And what you are reminded of when you read about her life is that actually, no, that she very much would have lived in households where the servants were, yes, they were employed, but it was one household and they interacted closely all the time.
Yeah.
Which,
of course,
Miss Austen with Dinah, you do kind of
feel that.
You do feel that.
Close relationship.
And that actually, you know, Jen, she was like good friends with the governess from her brother's house and the nursemaid, she was a grown woman, but you know, she maintained a correspondence with them throughout the rest of her life. You know, she
It's just
the
not
idea
the-
that
it's
she
just
was
not what she chose to maybe.
But, and she had an audience. She had books about. She must have known what people might be likely to enjoy reading and might choose to publish or buy. And a book with a big feature by the housemaid is not.
Although, in The Mysteries of Udolpho, Emily's maid Annette is a central character, but she is played as quite a ridiculous character.
Right.
And possibly, if Jane didn't want to make a ridiculous housemaid, she might have felt like there wasn't space in the books for like a well-rounded servant character.
Yeah, and it's made me want to think about and read the servant-y characters in all her books, because my impression is she's either neutral or perfectly sort of say the Miss Bates is and Mrs. Bates is Patty.
Yeah.
Like she's like a really like nice straightforward character, small character.
Yeah.
You know that they're not. She doesn't
appear very much,
but she doesn't sort of write them down. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, and that's interesting because John Mullan actually talks about servants a little bit, and he says, servants are always problematic, and there are moments where servants are problematic, but it's almost more like the people managing the servants are the problem. Like in Mansfield Park, Mrs. Price, Fanny Price's mum, has endless troubles with servants, but you can really tell that the problem is actually her kind of household management ability.
You wouldn't want to be a servant in her chaotic household.
Like Baddeley, who's the butler at Mansfield Park, seems perfectly respectable. Or you've got like Searle, the cook in Emma, who Mr. Woodhouse is constantly praising. Can't speak highly enough of.
Yes, and likewise Mr. Knightley and his housekeeper, whose name I forget. You know, who shows them around. Yeah. Yes, so, no, absolutely. So,
did you mean Mr. Darcy?
No, although that's another housekeeper who's
portrayed as a very like respectable young woman.
Yeah.
Older
So yes, that would be one of my grumbles about Longbourn. It makes an assumption about Jane Austen's attitude to.
And that reminds me, I've just got a book that I'm not going to read yet because it starts in 1830, so it's not quite in the Jane Austen July time period, but it's called The Housekeeper's Tale, and it tells the story of 5 different housekeepers in English country houses from over the course of 100 years. So it looks back in records and personal correspondence and things, and it's going to tell me, well, I'm hoping it's going to be really good. It's going to be like a mini biography of five housekeepers of big country houses, and talk about them as their role as kind of like house managers. Like having a respectable profession for a woman in that time period. So I'm looking forward to that.
Sounds interesting. Well, I may borrow it. Have we said what we want to say about Miss Austen?
I think we probably
Are we happy?
Yeah.
So we will say goodbye, but I will say that we're going to do a discussing drama about
sometime this weekend about
Lovers' Vows
by Mrs. Inchbald,
as featured in Mansfield Park, and that's going to be on Timmy's channel.
Hopefully later this weekend.
Bye.
Bye.